Hi, everybody. How are you all today? I'm just waiting for a few more to log in with us now, and we'll be ready to start shortly. So just give you a chance to join us. So we're here today for the hip mobility webinar. Lots to learn today, lots of information to kind of go over different levels of mobility and how we can manage at different levels as well. So we're just connecting now. Lovely. How are you? Welcome, everybody. Bear with me 1 second to have that audio. There we go. Apologies. You get to see my buddy in the background there, so that's no harm done. We'll be working with him very soon. Okay. That should do us. Okay. Apologies. Welcome, everybody. Just sorting out some audio issues there. Welcome to our hip mobility webinar. Great to see you all. My name is Sarah. I'm the master trainer for My Over 40 in Ireland and the UK. So I'm going to hold on just a couple of seconds here just to see everybody clicks in and everybody is joining us, and I'll get going then. As you can see, my poor friend here has got a dose of the nerves. His hands are in his mouth, but I'm sure we all will get settled once we start, and you can join in, you can help out, try some of the movements we're going to do as well. Okay, so let me start again and welcome everybody in case anybody's just joining. My name is Sarah Hearn and I'm the master trainer for My Over 40. I also teach functional biomechanics for Profi Fitness School in Ireland and the UK. I teach mobility and flexibility courses for them also. So a lot of information today I have for you, and hopefully everybody can get some benefit from it. Okay, so today we're going to look at why hip mobility is important, how to test it, and how we can improve that hip mobility. So I'm going to give you some general exercises you can do at any stage, from general mobility to post-op, if you're unfortunate enough to be joining us later on down the line of immobility or restricted mobility. So I see we've just gone live on Facebook. So welcome everybody on Facebook again. My name is Sarah Hearn and I'm master trainer for My Over 40 and I work for Profi Fitness School, Ireland and the UK. We're going to look at hip mobility today, test it, improve it, and I'm going to give you some exercises you can do at any stage, from general mobility to post-op. Apologies for those who are here from the start and I'm repeating myself, but I want to make sure everybody knows where we are. So if anybody here is unfortunate enough to be joining us further down the line of immobility or restricted mobility, we have a little bit for you there as well. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more, but I want to make sure I have all my facts and figures ready for you as well. Okay, so why is hip mobility important? So the hip joint, and I'm going to show you this a little bit closer as well. Let me bring them into you. Let me just tilt a small bit, bear with me. Okay, so the hip joint, it's a very complex joint. It allows a lot of movement. It's one of the most important joints in the body because it allows us to walk. It bears our weight. It allows us to run and jump. It also, the force of the strong muscles of the hip and leg are mobilized from this area. So very important to have mobility and movement in this area. So being the center joint structure of the body, we have the shoulder above the hip, we have the knee below the hip. So a lot of problems that can stem from the hip area can lead to the shoulder, can lead to the knee. So again, very important, that central aspect of the body. Okay, so most of your movements would function or hinge on your hip function. It bears your body weight, as we said, so your whole spine function is going to be important as well, but leading from the hip. The strength and function of that spinal joint is very much affected by how mobile your hip is, because if some of the muscles aren't active enough, your back will take over some of the strain, and that's why we end up with some back problems, maybe a bit of spinal issues. So we'll be talking about that a little bit later as well. Okay. So again, welcome everybody. I'm so glad you joined us today. Don't get to see you all, unfortunately, but any questions that you've sent in, we've received them, and we're kind of going through bit by bit as well. Okay, so what we need to know. Unfortunately for all of us, we sit and we stand. Sitting impacts the hip mobility in two ways. It weakens the glutes back here, your glutes, and your hip flexors, which are down the front of the thigh. Both the glutes and the hip flexors figure predominantly in the activation of your hips. So function of the hips comes from those muscles. So when they're weak or inactive, the lower back is going to take the brunt. So sitting then, we're putting a lot of strain on the lower back with the glute and the hip flexors. Piriformis comes in later. But then we look at too much movement. So we're thinking, okay, so I don't sit too much, I'm up, I'm standing, I'm moving, it's great. But unfortunately, too much movement throughout the day can be just as damaging to the hips as too much idleness can. So you're looking for a balance. Someone who's on their feet all day puts a load of pressure on their joints, which causes inflammation and degeneration. Now, there's a natural amount of that as we age, but we can help it. We can balance it out a little bit better by allowing the joint to function in the way it was designed to. So unless we've good hip mobility, our posture and other joints are going to suffer. As we said, there's a certain amount of natural degeneration with the body. Nothing we can do about that. But if we want to sustain it and give ourselves longevity, we need to look at these joints when we can and as early as we can. So, proactive flexibility, mobility awareness, and exercises can slow this down considerably. And if you're further along in the process, so you're thinking, okay, great, I could get in there and get it sorted before I get there. But what if you're already further down that line and you're limited in your hip mobility, or you've had hip injuries, you're suffering with maybe piriformis muscle, which is across the glute, shooting pain down the leg. Sometimes it mimics sciatica. And again, that's from movement or lack of movement in that hip joint. So what can you do to reverse the process if you are further along? So the first thing you'd do is you'd restore the balance between stability and mobility. But you always have to practice patience because the damage didn't happen overnight. So it's most likely not going to be reversed overnight. It's the process, but the steps for everybody out there. So I'm going to have a look at this guy here. I'm going to show you a little bit of the hip mobility. I'm going to show you, I need a drink first, bear with me. Lots of talking, apologies. I'm going to show you the skeleton here, and we're going to have a little look at that hip joint. So it's a ball and socket joint. Can you see that there? You can just a bit. So ball and socket joint, it sits into that space in the hip. I'm not going to be too technical today. We have a course on mobility, flexibility, anatomy, and physiology, so we can go through all that then, but just to keep this very basic so everybody understands completely. The ball and socket joint, the ball sits in this socket, okay? And if we limit mobility, the grinding effect that the hip joint would have on that socket area would wear down that surface an awful lot more, okay? So generally, you're looking at the hip joint being 360 movement. You have, so your flexion, so can you see that? So as my hand is in the way, bear with me, and I move to the other side. Okay, so we have flexion, the hip joint. That's where the angle shortens. Apologies, this guy's had his surgery already and he's a little bit immobile. So flexion. I'll show you these myself as well if it's easier to see. Extension then, the joint rolls back to this point. There's a slight extension in the thigh. We'll look at that too. So flexion and extension. Then we have Internal rotation, again, this may be easier seen when I do it myself, but if you look at that socket, it rolls internally and externally for internal and external rotation. Again, not the closest view there, but I'll show you. But as you can see, when that joint moves in all the ways it's supposed to, circumduction then being the full circle, the force of that movement is placed over a wider area. Okay, so a larger area of the hip joint is supposed to take that force. So when we limit our mobility, we reduce the area that that force is being displayed over, and it causes problems. It can wear down and degenerate this socket area. If you've seen hip replacement surgery, they take the whole part of the hip bone from the head of the humerus here in that ball part just here. You see it, quite a large space they take, and put a metal piece instead. Okay, so you're still going to have to move it. You're still going to have to be mobile. So why don't we try and get in there first and fix things that we can, or stop it happening in the first place? So basically that's why we're here. Okay, so all of these movements, the flexion, extension, internal rotation, external rotation, circumduction, all of the movements that come with the hip joint, they improve your body function and your posture, but we want to improve that range with control and stability. So you've just been able to move in that circle freely isn't going to do as good as if you can control it. So all the muscles that are in tangent or in function around that hip joint are working equally. Okay, and then if we do that, we're going to improve your hip movement, your function, and reduce pain. As we said, we take off the focus off that little socket area, we spread out the area of tension from the movements, and we give ourselves a little bit of more longevity in the joints. We're designed to move, we don't move anymore. So that's part of the problem. Sitting for too long, standing for too long, again, not something we can very much avoid, but you can definitely balance it out. Again, balance is the key. So if you're likely to be a person who sits for a long time, your exercises or your stretches or your mobility work is going to be in the other ranges of motion that you're not hitting in that sitting motion. So if you can imagine you're in flexion at the hip joint, there's a tightness or a shortness in that band down the front of the thigh. I'm sure a lot of you know what that feels like. Maybe even a tightness across the glutes because it's overstretched. So there's a lot going on there from a seated position alone. So like in order to improve your function of the hip and avoid surgeries down the line, mobility exercises are advised. Now, before we continue, I'm sure everybody here knows the difference in mobility and flexibility, but just in case, because they're often lumped in together and we're not explained what the difference is. Mobility refers to the movement around the joint. Flexibility is about the muscles. So the ability of the muscles to lengthen to allow that unrestricted movement in the hip joint. Mobility then is going to improve the blood flow to surrounding tissues. So it's going to reinvigorate muscles that weren't being used and give you better function in the whole body. Hip joint, back, like we spoke about before, all the joints that are stacked off the others. Everything is affected when something is. There's nothing works alone in the body. You'll see that yourselves. So we spoke about sitting. Standing, then we're talking about putting weight on the joints. When you talk about fascia and look at fascial movements of the body, you'll know that the body isn't necessarily stacked on the joints like we imagine it is, but there is a connection of force. And if my guy has a bit of a twisted hip here, God love him, but if we don't have the right stacking of the joints involved in the fascial chain, there's going to be an issue somewhere along the line. Okay, so I'm going to show you some stuff now shortly. I'm going to move to the mat, and this guy is going to go away for a while. So Again, just to go over a small bit, your hip. You're looking at your hip bone, but think about across here, you have your lower abdominals into your pelvis. Your pelvic floor is going to be involved. If you turn around to the back, then you're looking at across the sacrum and the coccyx. So all of the glute muscles, minimus, medius, maximus, are involved. You've got your piriformis, which cuts across the glute. We'll have a little stretch for that later on as well, which can definitely help sometimes with the pain or discomfort in lower back and in the glute itself. In our, pardon me now, my words don't come as quickly. In our advertisement for this course, I spoke about exercises that you can do to help with bulging disc. So what you're talking about in that case is part of the spine. There is a bulge of connective tissue. We're going to keep it very, very simple, in between those spinal bones, and it gets compressed and pushed out. And then the spine, being stuck in one position, presses on it. It doesn't give it any relief. So what we're looking at is opening that space, giving it a little bit of relief and giving mobility back to that area of the spine. So again, very basic, not technical at all there, but I want everybody to understand that it's something that can be worked on. They're terrifying words, herniated discs, that kind of thing, but we have ability to control how much pain we feel by how much work we do with the mobility and function of the area around it, basically. Okay, so I'm going to move this guy out of the way. He's going to go over to the corner for me. And I'm going to go to the floor. So what I'm going to show you now is how we can work on mobility and flexibility at different stages. Okay, so I'm going to start with general public. Again, bear with me. Okay, so starting with the general public with no severe injury or pain, we're going to have a look at 2 exercises that you can do to work on your hip mobility. Simple out. So let's change cameras here, and I can show you better. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Happy New Year to you all. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, so different view. Let's see. Oh, while I'm here, hi Lynn. Hi Carol, nice to see you. UK, wonderful. Wonderful. Anybody else wants to throw up hello there? We'd like to say hi to everybody. Apologies where my camera is placed, you'll see the top of my head more than anything here, but when I go to the floor, it's better. Yana, how are you keeping? Hi. Okay, so I'm going back to the floor. I'm going to show you 2 of those exercises that we can do. I have a camera running here, so I can kind of have a view of if, do you like my socks? White socks and a black outfit. Perfect. Okay, well, it's just to give you a better bit of visibility. So when I go down on my knee here, you can see what way there is rotation as well. So let me just turn this. My camera's slightly in the way there. So, okay, let's see. All right. So into kneeling lunge, you've probably seen this one for the hip flexor, and I'm going to do it on the leg closest to you. So I'm going to go into forward lunge on the right leg and drop the back leg down. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to stretch the hip flexor of the back leg. So a nice long lunge, body is upright. We want to stack the joints a little bit to start with at the back, so we have the hip over the knee. The foot or the ankle joint is coming back off the knee, but we're going to change that position as well. So the front leg is in a lunge position forward, 90 degrees, but we're going to sit into it a little bit, keep that body up. So you want to keep that chest up and really pushing in to this hip flexor muscle here. Now, just to add a little bit, I'm sure you've seen this movement, I'm sure you've done it in exercise classes, but how the smallest bit of movement can help. So again, I'm going to have to mind my balance. So again, we work on this as well. Balance is very important, and we'll speak about that later too. But from this position, I'm going to turn my foot, bringing it from the knee to the ankle, a little bit external movement. So an abduction away from the body. So my knee is still placed where it was, And the lower foot of the extended leg at the back, I've moved slightly externally. I bet you'd feel that now if you try it. So give it a go. You can actually feel the hollow, the space in that hip flexor there when you do it. So you're really accessing it, and then you can sit a little bit further in. Keep your balance. If you must, you can hold on to something just to steady yourself, but ideally you want to work on anything you can while you're down here, so your balance. That is really, really nice. Okay, so when you do one side, do the other side. So I'm going to do it. Let's turn around so you can see again. Make sure. Okay. So I'm going, this leg was at the back, so this leg is coming forward. Again, I'm in that long lunge position. I'll start with my joints stacked. My foot is in a straight line from the knee, and I'm going to sink into it. Again, make sure I have my balance, and then I can move that foot. Wow. Smallest movements really do help an awful lot. So try it yourself. I didn't even think that side was tight until I went and did this. So trust me, give it a go, and you'll find somewhere tight that you didn't even realize you had. Okay, so coming out of it then, just mind yourself. Okay, so I'm going to show you another one, but I have a second to show you. It seems we're talking about the people who are able to move already. Let's do a little test. Okay, so I'm going to sit cross-legged. And I have a huge audience if this doesn't work out the first time. And believe me, it doesn't always. But it's a good, fun test to try. And I can just feel my socks are slippy down while I do it. Okay. So I'm going to go from a seated position to a standing position, hopefully without using my hands. If anybody's tuning in just now, you tuned in at the right time. I might be just about to hit the ground. Okay, so I need a bit of motion for this. Aha, slowly does it. Definitely needed a bit of motion to get me going. Okay, so I have internal rotation in the hip joints and a lot of strength to push up from the floor. So if you're at a good level of mobility and flexibility, give that one a go. Okay. Trust me, it doesn't always work. So either film your attempts so you can share them with friends, or don't and hide. Okay. Let's see. Hip flexor stretch. Again, I'm a little bit high there, sorry. So I'm going to lie on my back for this one. Again, anytime you're coming to the mat, do it with safety and control in mind. Just support the body. So I'm sitting on my back, lying on my back, even I'm going to do a hip flexor stretch. So literally rolling down to the mat. Make sure you can see me. Yes, just about. Lovely. So we've all done the knee to chest. Okay, so you won't get much there. So if we extend the other leg, and we're working on a hip flexor here. So you want to make sure the rest of the body is connected with the floor. The main thing to do when you're working on mobility exercises is to make sure that there is no compensation anywhere else in the body that is allowing that movement to be a bit more free. So I'm making sure that my lower back is in contact with the floor, that I have that pelvic tilt that we're looking for there. When I move, I'm trying to keep my hips facing forward, hip joint facing forward and controlled throughout the movement. So again, we're going to bring that knee to the chest and extend the other leg. So I'm pulling in this side as close as possible and extending the other one as far as possible, really pushing down with the back of the calf and the thigh of the extended leg into the ground. Okay, so this is a flexibility movement because I'm assisting the movement. We spoke earlier about the difference between mobility and flexibility. Well, flexibility would have an assisted stretch, whereas mobility is unassisted and hopefully unrestricted. Okay, so you can hold that position. You can also push and pull, okay? So what you can do is you can place your hands on below the knee. We would never recommend on the knee joint. Place the hands on the shin bone there and equally push with the leg into the hands as you pull towards the leg with your hands. So you're creating this tension, push-pull kind of a tension equal. Again, you're stretching that other leg on the other side, reaching away from the body. Okay, so that's going to do a little bit there. Wait and see. So after 30 seconds or so, we're going to relax and place the leg down. So let's change over. Again, we want to extend through this hip while we contract and flex through this one. So bringing the knee up to the chest as close as possible. Again, if you're not able to do this, you can use a towel or something to bolster the leg, and then you can keep your upper body relaxed and pull in towards your body without having to reach with your hands. Again, if you do have disc problems, you may have issues reaching like this. So these exercises are more for general public without severe pain. Okay, so here I am again, extending through this leg here, flexing the hip joint on this side with the controlled push into the hands as the thigh gets strongly pushed back. Equal. Okay, so we hold and we relax. Breathe normally. And when you release, you'll feel a little bit better there. So what I would maybe suggest, let me just roll up. After doing those exercises that way around, I would probably do them the other way around. Personally, because when I did the hip flexor, pulling it in, I really wanted to feel that other motion of extending it. So that kneeling hip lunge would definitely feel great after that. Now what you can do is you can do them in rotation. So you can start with either exercise and do a couple of sets of them. Okay. I'm a talker, you guys. Made for webinars, no chance for anybody else to talk. Let's see if we've got any questions or anything before we go on. Oh. Lots of hellos. Thank you, everybody. Rosalie, hi, how are you? Dolores, Nick. Who else? Lots and lots. I'm going to miss people. I know I am, but anyway, I won't keep up all your time saying hi. But hi. Margot, hi, girl. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. So those exercises were for people that would be able to do a bit of movement. All right. If you're suffering with hip arthritis or bursitis, so arthritis, what we spoke about with the hip joint and that wearing down of that hip joint, that's the cause of the arthritis. Bursitis is inflammation. Itis is inflammation of the bursa, which is the sac that protects that hip joint. So it's going to feel quite a lot similar, quite uncomfortable, but what can you do, right? So what can you do? First of all, you want to talk about reducing the pain. Simple little things like placing a pillow between the thighs when you're in bed. So just say your bad hip is your left one and you're lying on your right side, because obviously you're going to take the pressure off of that left hip joint. And when you're in bed, if you place a pillow, you can buy ones that are specifically for the shape, but genuinely whatever you have will help separate the knees, and that way then you're taking the pressure off the hip joint, you're keeping out that internal rotation, you're keeping it in a regular forward position that it should be in, rather than allowing it to sink in, having that internal rotation and then sleeping on it. So now you're after almost compounding that problem. So again, very simple little things can be huge benefit. Let's have a little look, see. Oh yeah, okay, so just thinking about my poor grandmother when she had arthritis, when we got those pedals for her and she hated them. But genuinely, movement is going to be a huge benefit for arthritis. So seated pedaling for older adults is going to be hugely beneficial. So that movement, that constant movement, we spoke about the better blood flow earlier on. So it's going to give life to that area. If you just sit and don't move, you know yourself, you seize up. You're just like your car, you need to keep functioning, you need to keep moving, you need to keep warm. And then we stay functional. So when we are doing mobility exercises, so again, we spoke with the skeleton about, I'm going to stand for a second and show you. So again, don't mind missing the top of my head, but flexion. So bringing that knee up. Then you have extension, bringing the leg back. So think, what we're thinking about is that ball in the socket when we're moving. So that'll give you a better idea, especially with the internal, external rotation. So flexion, extension. Now, what we didn't speak about earlier is adduction and abduction. So let me turn to the front for that. Abduction is moving away from the midline of the body. Adduction is moving towards the midline. So ab and add. And then we have the rotations that we spoke about. So then this is why the white socks, you might be able to see better the movement with those socks. Let's see, I'm going to hold balance here just to be sure. So we're going to flex. I'll do it from the front, and then I'll show you a different angle if it's not visible. So internal rotation. So that hip bone, that ball in the socket is going to turn in the way. So the foot comes out, but the hip rotates in. Then we have internal rotation. That was external rotation. So the foot comes in, but the hip bone comes out. So when we're thinking about it, it can be a little bit confusing, but again, internal rotation, external rotation, they're just movements of your hip joints that you need to be aware that you can do. So that's 4, 6, and then you have circumduction. So the whole circle itself. When you're doing, say you're doing hip circles, we do a lot of warm-ups where you do hip circles. It's a very minimal space that we're working on there. You don't have full flexion, extension, rotation, but it does warm up the lower back, of course, and it definitely starts to move those hips. But if you were talking about mobility of the hip joint, you want to, again, I'm going to work on my balance here. So you want to make sure that the leg comes up into flexion. Again, when we were lying down, we brought the leg up. So that's flexibility. And mobility then is if we take the hands off, how high does that knee come up? How short is the distance in the hip joint? Apologies, balance needs to be worked on here. Although I think a little bit more of my over 40 and I'll have that, I think. Okay. So little breaks. Let me just check in with you guys. As I said, I kissed the Blarney Stone when I was younger, so I could talk all day. Hi, Lorraine, and thank you very much. Gosik. Gosh, I hope I pronounced those names right. Apologies if I don't. My name is Sarah, as I said earlier, and I have no H in my name, so people often call me Sarah, so trust me, if anybody would be grateful if someone pronouncing the name right, it would be me, so I appreciate it if you let me know if I'm getting yours right. Okay. Yes, okay, so we spoke about balance. I'm going to move the mat just to give myself a little bit more security on the floor. Sometimes the softness of the mat doesn't allow the feet to grip the floor as much for me. So let's see if this is going to work out now. I'm just after cursing myself. So you have your flexion. If you're talking about extension, you can bring forward flexion of the hip, but fully extend the leg. So that could be extension. But when we're talking about it standing, it's as far as the leg goes back, there's not an awful lot of extension and full standing motion. Your abduction, adduction. Adduction can cross the midline of the body as well, so it can come across and out. Again, when I do this move, it's about where the compensation comes from. So if I try and do an abduction, I'm going to have to hinge at some point to allow that leg to come higher. And where I feel it is across the glutes. So there is restricted movement in that glute that's not allowing me to get the full abduction. So those kind of things are things we watch out for when we're doing our exercises. Any kind of stretching or any movements, you pay attention to where you feel that restriction. And those are the areas that we would need to make more flexible in order to have better mobility. Okay, let's see. Those of you who've just had hip replacement surgery, again, you need to move. These are all things you'll be told, but if after looking at the skeleton and after seeing some of the movements, it might make a bit more sense. So you don't cross your legs. Bending over is not recommended. Like for putting on your socks. With the walker, you're given a walker and they want you to do basic exercises. And it's the marching on the spot. So you're working on that flexion and extension of the hip joint and strengthening that hip joint in those motions. Then you'll have abduction and always the toes will point forwards because they're trying to stabilize that hip joint again for you. So all of these movements, they seem very specific and small, but they're very important. So in order to get better, working through those steps that you're given is very important. And you'll have things like heel to toe rolls. So from your toes to your heels, simple little movements. Again, you have your ankle joint in there, but you're moving slightly through that hip joint and stabilizing again. So that's another thing that's very important, is stabilizing the hip joint. And you'll have 3 to 4 weeks of that. And again, very important, a couple of times a day, if that's what you're told to do, definitely do it because you'll be back to your near normal self a lot quicker. So the point of it all, everybody can do something to improve movement and unrestricted pain-free movement at that. I'm going to come down so you can see me. So that's why we created My Over 40. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that shortly. At the end of our webinar, I'm going to show you the 3 top exercises that I spoke about for the herniated disc and pinched nerves. So stick around for that, although we don't have much longer. Okay. So I'm going to go back to you general clients for a moment. I'm going to show you a couple of demos of hip mobility. So general clients, someone who's able to move and hasn't got pain or restrictions. Let's see. Always have your towel and your water, because you're going to need it, even though it's mobility. Wait and you see. You'll hip muscles that you didn't even know you had or existed. Trust me. Okay. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to show you a 90-90 seated position. Apologies for that little ledge over there. That's my computer and limited space, but I'll move back so you can see, and I'll sit up this side. Everything's backwards on camera. Okay, so again, down to the floor. I'm going to go into my kneeling lunge, and I'm going to sit down onto the ground. Wow. Now, bear with me. I can see, you can't see much, and I'll improve it. Again, white socks are to help. What angle is best? I'm going to describe too. So at the front, we have a 90-degree angle, and at the back, we have a 90-degree angle. When we try and sit like this, normally the back leg will come in. It's nearly always the way. And you have to kind of set it up. So you want to move it into a 90-degree angle, meaning that the hip joint to the knee joint is a straight line, and then that 90 degrees comes off to the ankle joint. Okay, and you'll see why it's important. As soon as you start doing it, those glute muscles start working like crazy. Again, so we're talking about mobility, but we're also working on glute muscles that we don't normally target. So is it important? I'd say so. Definitely. Okay, in that internal, this hip is externally rotated. This hip is internally rotated. So this position may be difficult for some. Again, we're talking about people a little bit further along in the mobility ability. You can support yourself with your hands. Again, you want to make sure that upper body is nice and tall and that you are joints stacked. So you're not leaning off and putting the pressure somewhere else. We want to sit up nice and tall. Again, start with supporting yourself. So you can lift, right? We're going to keep that back knee down, and then we're going to lift the foot. So tiny movement, and again, hence the white socks. So you're rolling, trying to keep the body straight. We're rolling onto the knee, lifting that rear foot. While we do this, then we also want to contract the thigh, make sure it touches the ground in the front as well. So you're working every part here. I'm going to move my hands so you can see. I'll try another position too. So internal rotation, furthering that internal rotation. You can do external rotation by lifting the knee and keeping the leg down. Again, black mat, really not helpful. Come on, let's move a bit. I'll sacrifice my comfort for your vision. Okay, so let's see. How much better? I think so. I think so. Internal rotation, external rotation of the hip. We're raising that foot. Okay, so the natural need will be to lean forward. That's fine if you keep the upper body nice and strong and you control it. And then as you progress, you can straighten up a little bit more. Try and get that foot up off the ground. Very minimal movement, but you'll feel it in the glute. Okay. And then eventually you want to be able to sit up straight and not need support. A little bit more difficult. Okay, so then you want to change sides. One side will definitely be easier than the other or better than the other. So there's my 90-90. Fix the back leg, support the body if needed, and raise the back foot off the ground. You might feel that there's less movement in one side than the other as well, which is going to be very telling on where that tightness is in the glute. Okay, so you have your lifting the knee at the back, keeping the foot down is going to work towards the front here, your external rotation of this hip from internally rotating it. Okay, another one. I'm going to go back to the good leg. We're going to do flexion and control the flexion. So again, in this position, we start in body weight. If you like, you can use your hands, again, just for support, not to control, not to mobilize the movement. Okay, you want to work from the hip. Your hands are here just for a little bit of support. So we're going to, again, move back so you can see my foot. And I'm going to use my hands again, just like you would in a back extension. They're just there for support. And you are shortening that angle in the front hip with control. Again, spine nice and long. Try and keep those hips facing forward best you can. And then you move to mano hands. And eventually you can use a weight. You can progress that even further by using weights. Again, try that on both legs. And then have a little look at your glutes tomorrow and how sore they are. You'll be appreciative, I'm telling you. So the exercises I'm going to show you shortly now for the herniated disc are going to feel lovely after that particular mobility exercise too. Okay, so let's see. Don't forget to try our cross-legged stand-up that we did earlier on, and send in your videos. It's fun. It's fun. I'll actually upload a couple of bloopers and then give you a bit of motivation to do the same. Okay. So, top 3 exercises for your herniated disc. I'm going to show you 1, 2, and then I need my ball for 3. Okay. So coming down to the floor. This can be done in bed, but I would say if you have a herniated disc, you probably want to do it in bed if you're able to get into bed. I had a family member who had a bit of a trouble with lower back herniated disc, and I think a bed was a bit of a stretch at the start. Couches seem to work better, but unfortunately for us all, mobility has to happen to affect change and to improve the situation, and sometimes it's the last thing you want to do. But as we said earlier, it's a use it or lose it kind of a situation, so very important that we push through and just get it done, really. Okay, so you can do it in a seated position, on the edge of the bed even if you want. With this one, I'm sitting on the floor for it, but I'm going to give you a demo anyway, and then I'm going to do it lying down, so kind of give you a better idea. So if you were sitting, to cross the leg over onto the opposite knee and leave that knee drop out. So figure 4 is what you're looking for. Again, mobility may be an issue, getting the foot up onto the knee while in a seated position. So you can use your towel for that. Again, as well, if you're doing this as a general public and not in a pain situation, note where your tightness is. That's where your mobility is restricted. Okay, so we can do that lying down. When you're lying down, you can add some movement to it as well. So coming down onto your mat, pelvic tilt to make sure the lower back is connected with the floor. And I'm going to bring this leg across in the figure 4 like we had when we were seated. So bringing the foot across onto the knee and leaving that leg drop out. Now, there's not going to be an awful lot of movement for some people. You may need to assist it a slight bit, give it a little bit of a push. Okay. Now, what's great, if you can do it, is to bring the opposite leg towards your chest. You can use a towel if you'd like to assist it, throw it down there, pull it up, but you want to bring that knee closer. Relax the upper body again. And then you'll feel a good bit of relief across the glute. As we said before, a lot of the pain and tension from back problems come from your hips, your glutes, those functional muscles, the big muscles in the body. So stretching those and taking the pressure off of those other areas is going to be huge. Okay. Again, change sides nice and gently. Cross on the knee, hold the thigh, and bring it in. Relax and breathe. Hold that stretch for a good 30 seconds. And then once you get the 30 seconds, you inhale, exhale, and on the exhale, try and bring it just that little bit closer. Okay, see how that one goes. Okay, so coming up. For herniated discs, you're looking at compression in that spine like we spoke about. So opening that space and allowing the nerves or whatever's pinched in there to be freer. So you can lie, starting to lie on your stomach is a great way to go about it. It takes time. So you can start with a pillow. So your pillow is underneath the stomach and it's extending that back ever so slightly, just giving that little bit of space for that bulge to move and relax a bit. As well as that, one of the most important ones would be trigger point therapy. So with your trigger point ball, we have them for my over 40 and we teach you how to do those movements as well. So I'm going to give you a little kind of intro to my over 40 now as well, just while I have you here. And it's really great program for mobility because as you can see, we spent 45 minutes and we touched on things, just touched on it. And a lot of things that you'll have issues with don't come up until later on. You don't realize your body compensates in other ways and gets you through. And then it's when you're older, you notice that the joints are after wearing down. You have your limited movement. All the problems start to seep through later on. So ideally what you would like is a plan or a program or something you can be doing that's going to work on each area that's going to come up at some point and generally just give you better movement, pain-free, unrestricted movement. It's not, when we go to the gym, if we go to the gym, a lot of us even would leave before we do our stretches. So, you want to be in, you want to be out. Very much to blame for that myself. But having something that you can do, a program that you can follow, really takes the pressure off those other areas and gives your body better movement. So just bear with me a second. I'm going to switch cameras back to you again now and say hi. Hey. So the light isn't as good on this one. Okay, so will exercise for the Piriformis Syndrome also be handy to improve mobility of psoas major and iliopsoas? Yes, everything is connected. As we said, all those muscles are, the iliopsoas particularly is hugely important for proper function of the hip joint. So any mobility of the muscles in that area is going to be beneficial. Piriformis syndrome was initially blamed. What it was the piriformis muscle crosses the glute and leans on the sciatic nerve. And they thought, and still think, even though there's some kind of always studies to do with everything and continuous learning, but they thought at the time that the piriformis muscle was leaning on that sciatic nerve, and then stretching it would allow better movement. Again, that blood flow through the muscle and take the pressure off the nerve. there's so many different studies on it, on things that you really need to know your body, know yourself, and how you do that is by working on your own mobility and flexibility, feeling where your limitations are. Sometimes it's a lot easier for the person themselves to feel where they're restricted than an outside person, whether it be masseuse, massage therapist, physio, to be able to diagnose specifically, especially in the case of Piriformis Syndrome, because as we said, it shoots down the leg, just like sciatica. You could go to a professional who will tell you, oh, you have sciatica, but they may not go through the steps of stretching areas and mobilizing areas to see if some pressure can be taken off, and then it would reveal it's something less severe. Not always, but as we said, movement is not going to give negative benefits as long as it's pain-free. So you do anything here that we've shown you and there's any pain involved, you stop, go see your professional, go see your doctor. But once you can move, do basically. I'm going to show you a short, yeah, bear with me now. I'm going to show you a short PowerPoint, a couple of slides, very minimal, and just give you a bit of background on my over 40. Absolutely love this program. So happy when I found it because I need to, oh, you can't see it. So happy when I found it because, as I said, wasn't a stretcher, didn't stretch, and suffer quite a bit with my knee joint at the moment. If I had known that I could avoid all this, it would have been great earlier on, but here we are now, it has arrived. So this is for instructors, the concept and the class structure. It's a program consisting of 60-minute classes, specifically designed to improve your mobility, flexibility, and give you pain-free movement. There's 3 parts to each class. Part 1, warm-up, essential. Sometimes programs don't incorporate enough time of a warm-up and not specific to the movements that are coming later. So this is pre-designed. We have the class works on the specific joints that we're going to mobilize and stabilize during the program. We work on balance, proprioception, neuromuscular awareness, strength. Everything is covered in the program in different stages. It's great. Part 2, then we work on trigger points. So each class works on 3 different trigger points, and the instructor is taught how to identify them and how to work or teach their client to work on them. Our trigger point ball and our duo ball are hugely effective for that, and there should be a picture in here, hopefully, of those. So it is a pre-designed program for mobility, flexibility, pain-free movement. It covers an awful lot. As you can see, your instructors are going to learn a lot. Trigger point therapy is great, absolutely great. If I'm ever sitting in the house in the evening and my back is tense from sitting all day, I'll take out my trigger point ball and have a little go. It's great. Absolutely, I'd recommend it to anyone. Plantar fasciitis, bottom of the foot, mobility is great for that. Okay, so the My Over 40 program, sorry, how does it work to deal with some of the life changes? So in our course, we go through those life changes. We have a good bit of information on the changing body, the aging body, and the immobile body, basically. So the program has been constructed with natural development of aging in mind. Exercises that target mobility, stability of joints, and improves or maintains spinal health. So something you don't think of when you're thinking of joint movements. Your spine is very important, and it's affected by those things. Your movement patterns, there's movement patterns in the program, apologies, that develops or maintains your proprioception. Proprioception is your awareness of your body in space. So how gracefully you move. I know that sounds like we're all going to be ballerinas now, but awkward clumsiness, the opposite of that, you know, those the senses that come with movement. Your balance, coordination, and strength. We work on your trigger points, and that works on to maintain muscle function, and gives you pain-free movement. So this is kind of a little look at some of our materials, the training materials that we supply. So as you can see, we go into a great bit of detail about joints, the fascia, that's a really weird looking picture down the bottom there, your lymphatic system, how all the systems of the body are developed with the program itself. Then there's the comprehensive class plans. So we have each class, the instructor is given a class plan. It's like a script, how to work on the areas that we are talking about in the program. It gives you detailed instructions, and that way then the instructor doesn't need to do anything really, only bring the personality. So the music is provided, the class plan is provided, the program of mobility development is set. You know, it just takes that pressure off trying to figure out what you're going to do next in your next class and how to move things on a little bit more in the mobility for everybody. So the classes have different levels of ability. So even in one class, you can have 3 different students or 3 different levels of student that you can help with your adaptations and progressions, which are all given as well. And that course is only available at Profi Fitness School in Ireland. Only just came to Ireland recently. We were in Poland and Spain. Huge take up there, huge development there, because people are really seeing the progression. About 5 weeks into the program is when you start to see the real benefits. You feel it straight away because the movements you're not used to doing, but 5 weeks to see benefits. And then if you keep at it for a year, you can talk about your body is going to be young, healthy, movable, just the way we want it. So we're inviting you today to give the gift of pain-free movement and become my over 40 instructors to join us. There is a live course next week, that's correct. So anybody, wherever you are in the world, can take part next week, if that's what you'd like to do. We actually have a discount as well. So the owner was very nice to me today and gave me a 50% discount to give to our webinar participants if you'd like to take it up. So the My Over 40 raises your qualifications to a level 5 EQF as well. So professional benefit. Just going to check the chat there. May I have a question? And Lorraine, big smile. Okay, so yeah, anywhere in the world, I'll be delivering this course. If I make sense to you today and you can hear and understand me, then please join me wherever you are in the world. I speak a tiny bit of Spanish, tiny bit of German. You know, if there's anybody I can help, let me know. Mary, how are you? Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so this weekend, for the whole weekend, they're giving that 50%. So it's normally €260 and they're going to give it for 130. So that's huge savings. And of course, you'll get more of me, more talking, but actually, guess what? In the course, you get to talk back. So hang on now, and I stop this share and I come back to you before I go. Okay, how long is the course? Brendan, how are you? We start at 10:30 a.m. and it depends on how long it takes to get through the material. So the absolute maximum would be 5:30 p.m. It can vary depending on the amount of participants and that kind of thing. Dolores, thank you so much. I hope I made sense. I kind of ramble a little bit once I get going. I'd be like, oh, I tell them a little bit of this, and oh, I tell them a little bit of that. And do I get to tell you anything? But yes, also, I'm to tell you that every 4 weeks a new class is given for My Over 40. So when you start, you do the course. If you qualify, you receive training 1, and then you get to work on that with your clients. And then every 4 weeks, you'll receive a new training plan. The plan that you receive is so comprehensive that you can take clients. I would definitely be able to take clients 6 to 12 weeks on one class and be doing developments on that. But we give you more than that. We'll actually give you a new one every 4 weeks, and you can progress that then with your clients as they're able. Do you have to pay for the new training plan, Lorraine? Yes. The way it works is it's a subscription-based service. It's $9.99 a month, and with that, there's huge benefit. Okay, let me go through a small bit now because I don't want to overwhelm you. You get your marketing materials. We help you with setting up your classes. You get your training programs, your music. There's an online platform where you can ask your questions if you need any more help from master trainers like myself or other master trainers around the world. It's a worldwide program, so you're getting the experience of all the instructors and getting to give yours too. So there's a lot involved. It is $9.99 a month. That's your investment. If you take in one client per month, which I guarantee you don't, you take in an awful lot more. It's needed. This is something that's not targeted in the market at all. People work on strength, people work on that kind of stuff. But mobility and flexibility, it's starting to come around, but we're really not hitting the need yet. So yeah. Join me for the course next weekend and find out some more. You can take the course and decide from there whether you want to be an instructor for My Over 40. You'll need to qualify your exam and to receive the first training and go from there. But any more questions, please do send them in. Mobility TP is my email address. I'm actually going to put it up in the email later on. The discount will be sent out to webinar participants as well. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. Absolute pleasure to have you all. And I really hope that you come next week and I get to see all your faces, because this one-sided conversation is weird. All right, guys. Have a good day. Bye-bye.